They say a man's house holds his history. Every nail, every board, every scrape on the floor has a memory buried under it. Mine had 50 years of them, birthdays, Christmases, arguments, laughter, and the echo of a woman's voice I still heard in the quiet hours. My late wife, Margaret. She loved this place like it was alive. So when my son Daniel stood across from me in the same dining room we'd shared for decades, his words didn't just cut, they hollowed me out. "Dad," he said, shifting his weight like a man rehearsing something unpleasant. "It's time you moved out. We need space." He said it softly, but not softly enough. The kind of voice people use when they've already decided what they're going to do, and they're just hoping you won't make it hard. I stared at him for a moment, my hands resting on the table's old oak surface, the same one he'd done his homework on, carved his initials into, spilled his first glass of wine over. "Space?" I repeated, quietly. "This house has 5 bedrooms, Dan." He sighed. "It's not about that. It's about privacy, boundaries. You know how it is. Emily and we need our own place, our own life. Our own life." Funny, I thought. I spent my entire life trying to build his. Emily wasn't there that morning. She never was when there were hard conversations. She was probably upstairs, pretending to tidy up while she waited for him to handle me. I'd seen the way she looked at me lately. Polite smile, distant eyes, the kind that said you've overstayed your welcome. I didn't argue. I just looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the house coat he was wearing, the watch on his wrist, the phone he dropped on the table carelessly. None of it would have existed without me, but there's something about getting old that teaches you restraint. You stop reacting, and you start remembering. "All right," I said finally, "if that's what you think is best." He looked relieved, almost surprised I wasn't putting up a fight. "Thanks, Dad, really. It's for the best. We'll help you find a place, maybe somewhere smaller, quieter. You'll love it." He meant well, I'm sure. At least he thought he did. But there was a glint in his eyes that wasn't love, it was the kind of excitement that comes with finally doing something you've wanted to do for a while. I just nodded. "Don't worry about me," I said. "I'll figure something out." When he left the room, I stayed seated at the table. The sunlight was creeping across the floor, slow and golden, touching the legs of the chair where Margaret used to sit. I could almost hear her laugh. "He's your son, Harold. Don't let anger take the best of you." But she always did underestimate my patience. That evening, when they went out to dinner, probably to celebrate their newfound independence, I walked into my office, opened the old filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. The deed, the original papers, signed, sealed, witnessed, and still in my name. I chuckled quietly to myself, not out of malice, but out of something closer to disbelief. My son had forgotten who he was dealing with. I'd built this house with my own hands, paid for every brick, every nail. When Margaret passed, I made sure the paperwork stayed simple, just me, in case Daniel ever needed it someday. I never thought I'd be the one needing protection. I sat back in my chair, running a finger over my name printed in neat ink on the top of the document, Harold Whitmore. My wife used to say I had the patience of a saint. Turns out, I also had the memory of an accountant. When they came back that night, they found me watching television like nothing had happened. Daniel smiled, oblivious, as if the future had already been rewritten. But in my head, the plan had already begun. They wanted space. So I decided to give it to them, just not in the way they expected. The next few days moved like clockwork. Their clock, not mine. Boxes appeared in the hallway. Furniture shifted. Drawers emptied. I watched quietly from my chair by the window, sipping my coffee as if I were the guest and not the owner. Emily took charge, of course. She had that tone, crisp, managerial, the same one Margaret used when spring cleaning. Only Margaret did it with warmth. Emily did it like she was erasing something. "Daniel," she called from the living room, "don't forget to take those old photo albums. Your dad probably doesn't need them." I smiled faintly. My photo albums. Pictures I took, moments I lived, but I said nothing. Daniel peeked into the den. "Dad, you sure you don't want to take anything before we go?" I shrugged. "I'll be fine. I don't have much left to pack." He smiled, relieved. Guilt never sat well on his face. Too heavy for him to carry long. They spent the next 2 days hauling their things into the car. Every now and then Emily would glance my way, eyes darting toward the old family portraits that still hung on the wall. She wanted them down, I could tell, but she didn't dare ask. When they finally closed the front door that last night, the silence was heavier than usual. I walked through every room. The living room with the faint outline of where the old sofa had been, the kitchen that still smelled like her perfume, the upstairs hall where Daniel once ran screaming during thunderstorms. Every inch of this house whispered memory, and every whisper reminded me exactly what they'd forgotten. The next morning, I watched through the window as Daniel loaded the last of their boxes into the car. Emily stood beside him, checking her phone, not even glancing back. He came in one last time, keys in hand. "Dad, here," he said, pressing them into my palm. "You can hold on to the spare set, just in case." I looked at the keys, then at him. "You sure?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. "Guess it's your turn to visit us for once." He thought he was being kind. Funny thing, youth often mistakes kindness for condescension. I nodded and watched them pull away. When their car disappeared around the corner, I sat at the dining table again, the morning sun spilling over the papers I'd laid out. The deed, the property tax receipts, a few legal notes I'd written back when Margaret and I handled our estate planning. Every piece of paper told the same story. The house was mine, always had been. By afternoon, I called a locksmith. "New locks," I said, "every door, today, if possible." He showed up within the hour, cheerful and curious. "Moving into a new place?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. When he finished, I handed him a generous tip. "Make sure those locks don't give in easy." That night, I slept better than I had in years. The house was quiet again. No slamming doors, no arguments, no awkward small talk at breakfast. Just the steady tick of the old wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator, the sounds of peace. 2 days later, the first knock came. It was Daniel. His face was flushed, hair messy, panic in his voice. "Dad, what the hell? Our keys don't work." I opened the door halfway, calm as ever. "Oh, that's strange. I had the locks changed." "What? Why would you?" He stopped mid-sentence as his eyes darted to the papers spread on the table behind me. "The deed. Dad, what's going on?" I tilted my head. "You said you needed space. I figured I'd help you find it." Emily appeared behind him, her arms crossed. "You can't just, this isn't right. The house was meant to be ours." I chuckled softly. "Meant to be and is are two very different things, Emily. You should know that by now." Her face turned red. "You're unbelievable." I stepped aside, gesturing politely toward the driveway. "You wanted me gone, but you're the ones who seem to be standing on my porch." Daniel looked down, speechless. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the ground like a boy caught stealing from his father's wallet. "Dad," he finally muttered, "we have nowhere to go." I looked at him, not with anger, not even disappointment, just a quiet, unshakable calm. "Then maybe it's time you start building something of your own, like I once did." He didn't reply. Emily pulled him by the arm, muttering something under her breath as they walked away. When the car finally pulled out of the driveway, I sat back down at the table, the same spot where it had all started. The sunlight fell across the papers once more, warm, golden, and mine. A week passed. The mornings were gentler now. The house breathed differently, slower, steadier, like an old man finally at peace. I spent my days fixing the small things I'd ignored before: a creaking floorboard in the hallway, a leaky faucet in the kitchen, the old gate that had rusted into stubborn silence. Funny how repairing a house can feel like repairing yourself. Every nail, every brushstroke, every drop of oil felt like reclaiming something they'd taken without asking. The neighbors, of course, noticed the absence. "Where's your son?" old Mrs. Carter asked from across the fence one morning, her garden gloves still on. "Moved out," I said simply, trimming the hedge. "Needed space." She chuckled knowingly. "Kids and their space. Don't they realize they're renting it from us in the first place?" I smiled. "They'll learn." In the evenings, I sat by the window, my window, and watched the sun fall behind the same oak tree I planted when Daniel was 5. Its branches stretched wider now, its roots deeper, the same way a father grows into his silence. Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying that last moment at the door, Daniel's face, that mix of shame and confusion. It wasn't triumph I felt, not quite. It was something quieter, heavier, and yet oddly freeing. Because deep down, I never wanted revenge. I wanted recognition. To be seen, respected, remembered as more than an old man taking up space. He had forgotten that this home wasn't just a building, it was history layered in wood and memory. The creak of the stairs was Margaret's laughter. The smell of pine oil was her Sunday ritual. The paint under the new wallpaper still bore Daniel's childhood drawings, stick figures and rockets, and a shaky attempt at writing Dad. No deed, no signature could erase that. I found one of those old drawings that week. It had fallen behind a shelf in the attic, faded, yellowed at the edges, but still alive in its simplicity. A small figure holding a bigger hand, both smiling under a crooked sun. "Me and Daddy," the label said. I stood there for a long time, holding that piece of paper, feeling every line of it dig into my chest. That night, I placed it in a frame and hung it right above the fireplace. The spot Emily once said was too cluttered. The next morning, the phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad? His voice was quiet, unsure. Morning, son. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything. I wasn't thinking straight. Emily and we've been staying at her sister's, and it's been rough. I said nothing for a moment. Let the silence carry the weight it deserved. I didn't mean to disrespect you, he continued. I thought you'd understand that we needed space to start our own life. I did understand, I said softly. That's why I gave it to you. He sighed. Yeah, I guess you did. Then, after a pause, can I come by, just for a bit? I looked around the room, the mended furniture, the glowing fireplace, the framed memory of his small, unguarded love. Part of me wanted to say yes, but another part, the part that had learned peace, that had rebuilt its pride, whispered that not every door needed reopening so soon. Not yet, I said. Give it time. Build your space first. Then we'll talk. He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, Okay, I understand. When the line went dead, I sat back and listened to the quiet hum of the house again. No tension, no footsteps echoing resentment, no need to prove anything anymore. Outside, the oak tree swayed in the wind, steady, unbothered, rooted deep. I poured myself a drink, raised it slightly toward the empty chair across the table, and smiled. To you, Margaret, I murmured, you'd have handled it gentler, but maybe you'd still be proud. The light dimmed slowly, the kind of dusk that doesn't rush to end the day, and as the shadows stretched long across the floorboards, I realized something simple, something powerful. Sometimes revenge doesn't need noise, or flames, or grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a man sitting in his home again, undisturbed, owning his peace. The quiet was the sweetest victory of all.